What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for joining me today. I want to kick things off by talking a little bit about Joe Barry before we get into some of the grades and my film review this week. Matt LaFleur made mention on Monday in his press conference that he did not have any plans of moving on from Joe Barry and firing him at this point. Also basically made mention that if he thought that that was the solution, he would have done so. Said that, and kind of put some of the onus back on the players, didn't necessarily think it was a scheme situation. So let's start there. First of all, not super surprised that they did not move on from Joe Barry. I actually should say I'm caught somewhere in the middle. I talked about it the other day. I don't think there's a perfect scenario on this team or in this moment where you fire Joe Barry and you have somebody to take his place. I just don't think there's anyone that's currently on staff that would make a better defensive coordinator, so to speak, than what Joe Barry is right now. And at least, even though it hasn't worked, Joe Barry has shown a propensity to try different things. So if you're Matt LaFleur, you can basically just say, hey, I want to see more pressure. I want to see more man. I want to see more zone. I want to see whatever it is. He can basically say it, and you're pretty confident that Joe Barry's probably just going to try anything at this point. So to me, like I said, he's gone at the end of the year. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So at this point, you just play out the remainder of the season. I don't think there's a perfect scenario for moving on. So from that standpoint, I'm not super surprised. On the other standpoint, this defense just got its face kicked right in and basically we're well past being, punched in the mouth at this point. The face is collapsed in, and the person that's ultimately in charge of that oversees that, is Joe Barry. And Matt LaFleur, every single time in a press conference when things go wrong, will take the blame. And yes, it is a deflection tactic. I do also believe to some extent that he feels like he is the ultimate owner of the team and he's responsible for everything. So I think he is ultimately taking some ownership with that as well. But when anything goes wrong with the team, if that's his fault, right? No matter what it is, if anything goes wrong with the defense, then that is Joe Barry's fault. So by that same sort of rule, I'm sort of surprised that in some capacity that after this defense got its face completely melted by the Philadelphia Eagles offense, where they couldn't stop the run and they couldn't stop the run again and again and again and again, that at some point, you probably have to do something, right? So I was semi-surprised. It would not have shocked me at all if I woke up on Monday and the news was broken by Rob Demovsky or somebody else that Joe Barry had been fired as defensive coordinator. Like I said, on the other hand, I don't think there's a perfect scenario, and knowing Matt LaFleur, I'm not super shocked that he didn't either. So that was my initial reaction to it. Now, let's discuss Matt LaFleur's comments, because he said, basically, paraphrasing here, that this wasn't just a scheme thing, this wasn't a play calling thing, and if he thought that it was, he would have fired Joe Barry. Well, there's truth there, and there's also a lie there. So let's start with the truth. Let me ask you this. You are now the defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers. What would you do? And specifically, I want to talk specifically about this Philadelphia Eagles game for a second, because I legitimately want to know what you would do if you were the defensive coordinator. Because he called a lot of man in this game. I don't think this was a great game to call man defense, because Jalen Hurts can run around, especially when your backs are turned to the ball. And I discussed that prior to the game. He called a lot of man. And again, you allowed Jalen Hurts to scramble all over. He called a lot of plays where you had a spy specifically on Jalen Hurts. That didn't work. He called a lot of plays where his edge defenders, or whoever was, responsibility it was just to play contain on the outside, lost contain over and over. I lost my mind watching the defensive tape, watching guys who had contain on a play get sucked inside. It was like different guys on so many different occasions. So they couldn't contain on the edges. The coordinator, the call was for there to be contained on the outside so Jalen Hurts couldn't escape. And what happened? Jalen Hurts escaped. He called plays where they had sufficient run defenders and they couldn't man up and hold up at the point of attack against the Eagles' offensive line. We've seen this team play zone. Do you want to play zone? Because this team can't communicate to save its life on the back end. So I don't know if you want to, and if you want to commit more numbers to the box. Are you confident that AJ Brown's not going to beat you down the field? Like, at some point, you have to be able to call something and have confidence that your guys on the field are going to get the job done. This front could not pass rush. This front could not get off of blocks. The linebackers, McDuffie and Barnes and Quay in this game, could not get off of offensive linemen to save their life. There were numerous plays where you've got Kenny Clark and Dean Lowry and Jarron Reed and all these guys who are just walled off to one entire side of the field, and the running backs have daylight ahead of them, and it just takes one offensive lineman to clear out any of those linebackers. You have corners like Jair Alexander who are completely avoiding basically contact in the run game at times. You've got Adrian Amos who just doesn't have the foot speed to, basically get to the outside and make plays. At some point, as a coordinator, you have to have something or someone that you can lean on to say, hey, if I call this, I feel confident about it. If I were a defensive coordinator of the Packers, I don't think there's anything that I could call that I would feel confident in that the defense could go out and actually execute what I'm asking them to do. That's just where this defense is at right now. It's a soft defense that can't hold up at the point of the attack, that can't play zone, that can't contain on the outside, that can't spy a quarterback, that can play some man, but we've seen Rasul Douglas get beaten man too. Like, there's just nothing that you can call. And to Matt LaFleur's point, that's not all on Joe Barry. That's on coaching. That's on execution. That's on guys going out and doing their 111th and doing their job. And just a quick aside here, one of the things that's been massively disappointing in Mike Pettin seasons, what we saw a lot of was 11 guys playing individual defense. Last year, under Joe Barry, at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and sincerely in that game against the 49ers in the playoffs, we saw a lot of times where this team was actually playing team defense, which was super exciting. This year, back to 11 guys doing their own thing with their own set of rules, and it's just been a nightmare. So to that point, again, I kind of agree with Matt LaFleur. It's not all on the play call, because I don't know that there's a play call that Joe Barry could call that I would feel confident that those 11 guys could go out and execute. So that's where it's at. I don't think that Jerry Gray or any other Aubrey Pleasant or any other defensive coordinator that's calling those plays at this time is going to change all that much. That said, there's also some falsehoods in his statement, because let me just say this. The Eagles were killing you by running the football. They were killing you over and over. And it was some of Jalen Hurts scrambling. It was some of just Miles Sanders and the running backs gutting you up the middle. It was some called Jalen Hurts runs, but they were killing you by running the football. And there were so many times where you did not have sufficient numbers in the box to be able to stop the run. And it might look like it on the surface. You might say, all right, they've got 5 offensive linemen and a tight end, and I've got 6 guys to man up on those, or 7 guys total in the box. It may look like that, but your defensive linemen and edge rushers across the board are getting blown off the ball by their offensive line. And not only that, but if you're even numbers in the box, you've got all of the offensive linemen, the tight end to block your guys, but you also got the running back, and you've got Jalen Hurts, who you have to account for at all times as well. The math was consistently in the Eagles' favor. And if you're getting blown off the line of scrimmage by their offensive line, you have to start bringing more numbers into the box. And I understand that there are disadvantages to that, because now you've got A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, who are running one-on-one with no safety help, and you're asking for explosive plays down the field. We saw the touchdown before half. We saw what Jalen Hurts is capable of. But at some point, if you are getting murdered by something, you have to stop that thing from happening, because you will die if you don't. And they were getting killed by the running game. And if you don't commit numbers to stop it, you are going to die. You are going to lose. So yeah, having A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and that entire group of wide receivers getting single coverage and not having safety help doesn't sound ideal, but neither does just not stopping the run and not committing the numbers that you need to be able to stop the run when they're getting, 5 yards, 8 yards, 20 yards, 6 yards, 4 yards, 8 yards every single time, and your guys up front just can't stop it. So Yeah, it's not ideal. And like I said, I don't know that there's any defense that Joe Barry could have called that would have been sufficient to stop the Eagles, because this defense, just from a personnel standpoint, just was not up to the task in that specific game against that specific team. But at some point, you have to change your philosophy, because if you don't change something, we know the result. We know that your defensive front cannot hang with their offensive line. And if you don't commit extra numbers to the box, they're just going to keep running it down your throat, and you're not going to stop it. And that was what was frustrating, was the lack of adjustment and the lack of saying, you know what? My hands are tied at this point. I don't want to commit 9 guys to the box and put my safeties up there and leave my corners completely on an island, but I have no other option at this point, because if I don't do that, they're going to run for 363 yards and beat the crap out of me. And you just have to stop it at some point and deal with whatever other consequences there are later, or just hope and pray that Jair and Rasul hold up on the outside, or maybe get lucky, maybe pick off a pass, maybe you get some pressure that results in a forced fumble. Who knows? But you cannot just let them run the ball over and over with no resistance whatsoever. So I'm with Matt LaFleur in the fact that I understand not making the change. I don't think there's a perfect play caller and defensive coordinator to take his spot. I don't think that there is any coordinator that is going to call plays differently, where all of a sudden it's like, man, why didn't Joe Barry think of that? I do think it can be better. I do think Joe Barry has clearly not been good enough. And like I said, he's going to be gone at the end of the season. They're going to replace him. I just don't know that anything changes by you making that change at this point. So a level of frustration there, certainly, because this is a coordinator who has not held up his responsibility as a coordinator. It hasn't been good enough, regardless of the personnel and the way that they're getting beat out on the field. It hasn't been good enough. And like I said, if everything is Matt LaFleur's responsibility as a head coach from the football team down, well, everything on the defensive side is the responsibility of Joe Barry from the head down. And this defense as a whole has been ridiculously disappointing, and you need a complete and total overhaul on defense, from play caller to coaching to personnel to all of it. And that's going to start in the offseason with Joe Barry. I know some of you will certainly be disappointed that it didn't happen this week. I understand it. I just don't know that it actually would have accomplished anything other than, to satiate fans who are, hoping for some comeuppance based on the lack of productivity for a defense that we all had extremely high expectations for coming into this season. So, like I said, would not have shocked me if it happened. Not surprised that it didn't. And at this point, you're just going to have to keep having Joe Barry try different things and hope that this defense starts playing better, because what was on tape, as I went back and watched all 80 of those snaps on the All-22 and graded every player, was horribly bad. As bad as you could possibly expect. And it starts with not being able to stop the run. And when you can't stop the run, everything else is going to fall apart. You've got to eat your vegetables first. I've said it so many freaking times, but if you can't eat your vegetables on early downs and stop the run on early downs, you can't be a flashy defense that gets to call a ton of fun blitzes and get teams in 3rd and longs. And, it would also help that when you actually get teams in 3rd and long, that you get off the field, which is also something that this defense has been piss poor at. So it's all bad on defense right now, especially coming off of this game. Let's just start with some of the grades on the defensive side of the ball. There were 4 players who graded in the positive this week on the defensive side of the ball. Any guesses? I will let you pause it here if you want to and write in the comments below your 4 guesses. Imagine me telling you at the beginning of the season that these were the 4 players on defense in a game that graded in the positive. Rudy Ford, number 1, again, plus 0.65 grade, large part due to the forced fumble, which was a very big play in this game. Had a few missed tackles, had a couple off plays in coverage, had a couple really nice plays where he came up and made aggressive plays. So basically up and down, except for the forced fumble, which was a huge play in the game that Quay was able to recover and should have brought for a touchdown had it not been for the most boneheaded blocking by Jair Alexander that I have ever seen from any player in the NFL. But I digress. Really nice game again for Rudy Ford. He was number 1. Number 2, believe it or not, Keyshawn Nixon, plus 0.6 grade. Had that great hit late in the game on the quick bubble screen where he just came up and obliterated a wide receiver. And he just tackled really well all game. If there was one player that actually tackled well in this game, it was Keyshawn Nixon. Actually held up pretty well in coverage. Wasn't perfect, but I was impressed with the play of Keyshawn Nixon in the slot. I think there are signs that he could probably get attacked a little bit more, but he wasn't in this game. And more often than not, when he was in coverage, he held up. When he was in a position where he could make a tackle, he made a tackle. And I was impressed with Keyshawn Nixon. So your two guys are Rudy Ford and Keyshawn Nixon, two of your defensive backs who are not even supposed to be on the field this season. Those two, number 1 and 2 in this game. Number 3, TJ Slaton, plus 0.3 grade. Nothing outstanding, but actually got into the backfield, held up at the point of attack on numerous occasions, did get turned around a couple times, played a bit too high a couple times, but probably the only defensive lineman that won his fair share of the battles against an Eagles offensive line that kicked, again, the Packers in the teeth over and over and over and over all day long. So kudos to TJ Slaton for being the guy that actually held up at the point of attack. He was involved in some of those, 4th and short plays, and he, kind of held up there at times as well. So this was a nice performance from TJ Slaton, and one of the few. And the only other player on defense that graded in the positive was Justin Hollins, plus 0.1 grade. Had some plays where he got sucked inside, had some plays where he got blocked out of the play a little bit, but also had a really nice sack. Also had a play where he set the edge perfectly and got a tackle, or was able to help in a tackle in the backfield. Like, just had some kind of eye-opening plays. And for a defense that had very few plays that actually went in their favor, Hollins was actually involved in a couple of those. So certainly some ups and downs, when he wasn't making those plays, but those plays were still extremely helpful and helped him grade in the positive in this game. So only 4 defenders in this entire game that graded in the positive: Rudy Ford, Keyshawn Nixon, TJ Slaton, and Justin Hollins. The 3 lowest graded defenders, all with really tough games. Number 1, Kenny Clark, negative 1.35. I actually want to pull this up. I didn't have this up listed, but I want to pull up the grades for Kenny on the season, because I want to give you just an idea of how much things have changed. And again, I don't know if he's fighting through an injury, but this is Kenny Clark on defense. This was his first 7 weeks. Plus 1.85, plus 0.6, plus 1.3, negative 0.45, plus 0.55, plus 0.25, plus 1.15, a 5.25 grade over the first 7 weeks. Here are his last 5 weeks: negative 0.85, negative 0.25, neutral or 0, negative 0.95, and this week, negative 1.35. Negative 3.4 over the last 5 weeks. Has been a complete and total shell of himself over the past 5 weeks. I don't know why. I cannot explain it to you. There are plays where he will win and he looks like Kenny Clark, but it's like 1 or 2 plays. And on all of the other plays, he's getting taken out of the play at a level that I have never, ever seen out of Kenny Clark. I don't know if he's fighting an injury. I don't know if he is fed up with this scheme and how he's played. There was one time in this game where he just went through the motions on one play, just one play where he basically just got up and kind of went through the motions. That is the first time I can ever remember seeing a play like that from Kenny Clark. I can't tell you what's going on. And yeah, I don't know what to tell you, but it has been beyond a night and day difference from the first 7 games where he was on a tear and looked like he was nearly unstoppable is aggressive, but he was a nuisance for opposing offenses all day long, to teams basically being able to get him to any point that they want. That is not Kenny Clark. That is not his brand of football. He's not always the flashiest. He's not always the sexiest. He's not the guy that's usually going to explode into the backfield and make big sacks a la Aaron Donald. But he is a complete menace and nuisance. You can't move the guy. He will get into the backfield. He will reset the line of scrimmage. And these past 5 weeks, you have seen almost none of that. And it's astounding to see the difference. And if I had to guess, I would say he's probably fighting some sort of injury, but we've been given no indication of that. And like I said, when you see him make some plays that he is still capable of making, it leads you to believe, all right, he can still do that. But man, the play has just been I don't even know the adjective I want to use. It's been pathetic from a Kenny Clark standpoint, and lowest graded player on defense. And let me just say, this is not sensationalized ever, ever, ever. I will give you my honest grade always and forever. I'm not going to give you like well, Kenny Clark played bad, so let me sensationalize it and make him so he was the worst graded player so I can call it out even more. He was legitimately my lowest graded player in this game, and it was play after play after play of not getting off of blocks. And to be fair, he's going up against the best center in the league, arguably, and a phenomenal Eagles offensive line. So if it was just this week, you would certainly be willing to give him some forgiveness on that. But this has been basically 5 weeks in a row now where we have not seen the Kenny Clark that we are used to seeing. And even when he's gone against great centers in the past, he's usually up for that task. And yes, the other center is going to win some of those battles, but you can tell in the past that he's gotten the enjoyment of going up against a Ryan Jensen and kicking his butt on plays and, showing that he can beat any center in the league. This has not been that over the past 5 weeks. This is not the Kenny Clark that we are used to seeing. Number 2 on my list, Dean Lowry. Dean Lowry's had a solid season so far, not spectacular, but holding up more often than not. I had a couple plays in this game where he had, some nice tackles in the backfield, or at least reset the line of scrimmage is aggressive, but at least held up at the point of attack, but just not disengaging at the point of attack and able to actually make plays. Got pushed off, got sealed off, as I mentioned earlier. Just a rough game on this one for Dean Lowry. And then Isaiah McDuffie, holy crap. He came in limited playing time and missed multiple tackles, got completely annihilated at the point of attack by the Eagles offensive line. It was a rough day at the office for Isaiah McDuffie. So Ford, Nixon, and Slayton, my 3 highest graded defenders. Clark, Lowry, and McDuffie, my 3 lowest graded defenders. On offense was so much better. Christian Watson, number 1 graded offensive player, plus 1.0 grade. Graded in the positive for, I think, the 4th straight week. He has been on an absolute tear. It has been, 4 weeks now of plus 0.35, plus 1.4, plus 0.75, plus 1.00, which amounts to a plus 3.5 grade over the last 4 weeks. Had the drop early in the game, had a couple plays early in the game where he was a little bit shaky, but man, 4th down reception, had the nice slant from Rodgers on a run solution, had of course, the 4.2 blazing speed 40 on the touchdown reception from Jordan Love, where he took it the distance. Like, just some really, really great stuff from Christian Watson. The same thing I can say about David Bakhtiari, not the 4.2 40 and making explosive plays, but fantastic game from him, plus 0.75 grade. It would not shock me if by the end of the year, even with missing all that time, even if coming back from injury, if David Bakhtiari ended up as my highest graded offensive player. He's already moved up into 2nd this season on offense as my 2nd highest graded offensive player, behind only Aaron Jones. And like I said, it would not shock me if Bakhtiari ended up passing him, and will probably be my highest graded player on a per play basis if I had to guess this season. So he is not, again, quite back to first team all pro level David Bakhtiari, but he's so freaking good. And like, there's so many plays where I just missed. Like, he gets his hands on the defender and it's done. It's over. The defender has no chance. You don't even have to worry about that player anymore. You can't say that about any other offensive lineman, not even Elton Jenkins, who's playing a lot better. You can't say it about any of them. There are times where Bakhtiari it's engaged and the play's over for the defender. It's so fun to watch. He's so talented. He's so freaking fun. And I'm just so happy we got to see him play at this level again. And then number 3, Jon Runyan Jr., just going through the roller coaster. 3 weeks ago, he had a plus 0.7 grade, was one of my highest graded offensive players in that game. Last week, a negative 1.05, one of my lowest graded players last week. And then this week, a plus 0.7 grade, one of my highest graded offensive players again. So just a roller coaster for Jon Runyan. You see some of those inconsistencies, but 2 out of 3 weeks, he's had a really, really good game now. So hopefully he can continue to do that. He played really really well a season ago. We're seeing some of those flashes come back this year, at least more recently, and certainly in this game as well. So nice game from Jon Runyan Jr. overall. Honorable mentions to Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, who both had really nice grades in this game and both ran very well. Dillon, I thought it was his best game of the season by far. Aaron Jones had the touchdown reception in the end zone from Rodgers, which was gorgeous. So some good stuff from both of the running backs as well. And then Jordan Love graded plus 0.4 in this game in very limited playing time, which was to nobody's shock, at least from what you saw in the game, a very solid and sound performance from Jordan Love. My lowest graded offensive players, Tyler Davis, negative 1.35, ran the wrong route on the interception. Even after running the wrong route, faded back a little bit too far, missed multiple blocks in this game. Just a really tough day at the office for Tyler Davis. Aaron Rodgers, negative 0.15 is my second lowest graded player. He threw 2 picks. And even though Davis ran the wrong route, he threw the wrong ball with not enough power on it. I don't think he ever really saw the safety on the play. If he didn't, that's on him. If he did, he needed to throw the ball low and with more power. He didn't. It was just a bad throw overall. The same thing, he escaped the sack, which was gorgeous on the first interception, but then made the really poor decision to throw to Lazard, who was not open, threw it behind Lazard off the helmet, ends up getting intercepted. When you have 2 plays like that, even though he had a pretty decent remainder of the game, when you have 2 plays like that, it's just going to cost you. And I think had he been able to finish out the game, there's a really good chance that he would have graded it, positive or maybe even well in the positive. But those were 2 really negative plays while he was in there. He ends up with a slight negative grade. And then Allen Lazard with a negative 0.1 grade. The only other player that graded in the negative was Randall Cobb with a negative 0.05. Did have the touchdown play, but outside of that, had a little bit of a tough day at the office, at least for what we're used to with Randall Cobb. So quick recap, top 3 offensive players, Watson, Bakhtiari, and Runyan. Bottom 3, Tyler Davis, Aaron Rodgers, and Allen Lazard. Top 3 defenders, Rudy Ford, Keyshawn Nixon, TJ Slayton. Bottom 3, Kenny Clark, Dean Lowry, and Isaiah McDuffie. That is going to do it for me today. I'll be right back here tomorrow with Mike Wall. It's been a hot second since I talked to Mike, so it'll be great to catch up with him a little bit earlier in the week than we usually do. So again, make sure to check that out tomorrow and subscribe if you have not already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.